I'm Shanna Martin, host of the Tech Tools for Teachers podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Coming up on episode 245 of the House of EdTech podcast, I've got a great AI-based tool to help students learn vocabulary. We're going to end an era as we say goodbye to SatChat, and we're going to find out if you can become a ruthless EdTech evaluator. Strike up the band. Welcome to the House of EdTech. My name is Chris Nesi. The House of EdTech launched in 2014, giving me the opportunity to speak with teachers, leaders, and creators so you can more effectively integrate technology, strengthen your pedagogy, and have more confidence in your classroom and school so you can make an impact. Get involved with the podcast by visiting my website, chrisnesi.com. Using technology isn't difficult, and this is where it begins. This is the House of EdTech. And here we are. My school year is almost over. June is in the air, but it's still the month of May. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the podcast. If you're a new listener, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. Very excited to have you here. And this episode is really interesting because it's based on an article that I recently read on the New York Times. Not the failing New York Times, just the New York Times. But first, I want to announce the winner of the 2024 House of EdTech Final Four, and the winner is MagicSchool.ai. Congratulations to MagicSchool.ai for winning this year's tournament. They ultimately defeated all the big and heavy hitters. It was a fantastic tournament as I reflect on it, and it really, you just can't ask for more than what we got out of this year's tournament. As I reflect back on this whole thing, okay, Magic School, ultimately, they defeated CurryPod, Canva, and ChatGPT, and School AI on their way to the 2024 crown. So if you did not listen to the last episode, episode 244, make sure you go and visit my website, chrisnesi.com/HOET Final Four, and that's the number 4. And you can see the final bracket, and you can also check out the previous editions, because this is a long-standing tradition here on the podcast. And who knows what will happen in 2025, as again, this year's tournament focused on all AI-related and adjacent tools that are out there helping teachers, helping students, and AI is here to stay, as we've all come to say. So, there we go. All right, let's get into this episode's EdTech Thought. If you're listening to this episode relatively close to when it came out, here in May of 2024, and you have been on Twitter for any period of time, one would think, and also if you're obviously a listener of this podcast, you have heard of SatChat. Well, SatChat is dead. I mean, that's a really blunt way to put it. But SatChat has come to an end. What started out as a Twitter chat in 2012 by New Jersey's own Billy Krakauer, Scott Rocco, and Brad Curry, they have decided to end SatChat. I first got connected with these guys through EdCamp New Jersey here in New Jersey, and had the opportunity to work with those guys planning EdCamps and being a part of SatChat and seeing it happen live when they would live stream it and do it early in the morning before EdCamp New Jersey would even start in those early years of EdCamp. And, you know, this whole idea of being a connected educator, and SatChat has to be one of the longest running Twitter chats in existence in the education space. All right. It was there for you every Saturday morning. It has changed or did change formats throughout the last 12 years. It used to be an hour. There used to be 5 questions, and there used to be a SatChat podcast on the BAM radio network. So Scott and Billy and Brad certainly did something as 3 New Jersey educators that is difficult to do. And they created this tremendous community of educators around the world. People would tune in, and every chat would start out with, introducing yourself, where you're from, what you do in education. And it provided so much opportunity and really paved the way for the Twitter chats that developed in the same time or over the last 12 years. I have to say thank you to SatChat because it's one of the reasons that I podcast, not because SatChat taught me how to podcast, but, and this is no slight against Billy, Scott, or Brad, but just, the pain point that is Twitter chats in general for me as I've developed over time is, SatChat was such a large group of people, and it encouraged me to podcast because, I've got things to say, obviously, and, tweeting, I just felt I wasn't being heard, or participating in Twitter chats, felt I wasn't being heard. I felt that podcasts and live streaming would be the next evolution of the Twitter chat. If you've been with me for any number of years, you know that Podcast PD started out as a Twitter chat, and then I pushed AJ and Stacy to evolve that into Let's Stream It Live, and we were on blab.im, RIP Blab, and that turned into a podcast. And I still think that Twitter chats needed to evolve, right? As the world changed and being a connected educator changed, I think that Twitter chats should have evolved. I will say that I think Billy, Scott, and Brad missed the opportunity to, in addition to having the chat, evolving that process. And I always thought that there was an opportunity for them to really do a real podcast, not one of these or funky BAM radio knockoff podcast things. But again, that's no slight against them. They just, you do what you can in the moment. Should they have maybe started to live stream it or develop the community even further beyond Twitter? I think so. And while I appreciate getting to connect with those guys and connecting with people, I also wonder, why does it have to die? Or why does it have to end? I participated in the last one, and one of the sentiments I put out there was, it could keep going. I mean, don't stop using the hashtag. People know the hashtag, and there are still community and people out there. Why couldn't somebody just decide to, on this, very next Saturday morning at 8 or 8:30 or 9, just run a Twitter chat and use the hashtag? Now, I know people will say, oh, well, it's theirs, and, out of respect, they don't own it, right? There's no trademark on SatChat. If you want to run the chat and take up the mantle, use the hashtag and start asking questions and keep the community going. I don't know the reasons why they're stopping it, but maybe something else will develop out of it. I don't know really what the point of the EdTech thought was, but I guess I will just wrap and say, again, Billy, Scott, and Brad, helped to develop and build something that was bigger than the 3 of them. It went global, it built community, and it connected a lot of educators who I got to meet through EdCamp New Jersey, who I got to be connected to because of Twitter. And don't ever stop connecting. I think that's the point. Don't stop connecting. And maybe someday Twitter and the hashtags and X will evolve in these chats. Maybe more people will podcast. I don't know. We will find out. But that's not what's going to happen today. And that's my EdTech thought. Let's dive into this episode's EdTech recommendation. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about Vocabulary Quest. You can find this at their website, vocabulary.quest, Quest. And their founder, person really behind a lot of what they're doing over there, Rachel, who I got to speak with. And I want to share this tool because I think it's going to revolutionize the way that students can learn new words. And I think this really harnesses AI in a positive way. So whether you are a student, a professional, or you are just somebody who loves language, this platform makes expanding one's vocabulary fast, fun, and based on the conversation I had and the data that Rachel shared with me, it could be incredibly effective. Vocabulary Quest isn't just about rote memorization of new words. It can transform and does transform vocabulary learning into an exciting adventure with some gamified elements. Each level progresses through increasingly challenging words, and it's integrated into personalized interactive stories, puzzles, and games. And this method not only makes learning more enjoyable, but also significantly boosts the retention rates of new vocabulary. Imagine your students looking forward to each session as their vocabulary effortlessly expands. For students who might be preparing for exams like the SAT, the SAT, a robust vocabulary is key to higher scores. Vocabulary Quest can help students build that foundation quickly and efficiently, giving you the edge that you need. For the avid reader and learner, understanding every word in a text enhances comprehension and keeps your interest piqued. No more skimming over the unfamiliar words. Sail through even the most challenging material with ease as you expand your vocabulary. You and I as professionals, we sometimes need to know the right word, and we need to know it at the right time, and that can elevate our communication skills, making us more persuasive and effective in our careers. It's not about using big words to show off, but about having the perfect word ready when you need it. And for everyone, a richer vocabulary can boost your social status. Research shows that vocabulary size can even impact your relationships, making you more attractive and engaging to other people. What makes Vocabulary Quest stand out are its ridiculously effective memory aids and personalized learning approach. It uses advanced AI, and that can craft mnemonic devices, images, and associations with words that are tailored to the user's interests, ensuring that new vocabulary sticks for life. If you're ready to try it, you can go to vocabulary.quest, and they offer a free trial. You don't need to pay anything. In fact, reach out to Rachel and tell her I sent you. There's no commission, there's no nothing, but you could tell her that you heard about this on the House of EdTech. They have a fantastic monthly list of 30 words that a child can work with every day. Head over to vocabulary.quest today and start the journey towards a stronger, more dynamic vocabulary. When you get in there, you will see that through AI, and almost it reminded me of Mad Libs when she was showing me how it worked, where it will ask you questions, it will show you a word, you answer some questions, and then it will create an image, and it will give you then quizzes and show you the images, and it will help you come up with mnemonic devices, as I said earlier. So I thought this was really cool, and I'm in the process of getting access in a more detailed way from Rachel that I'm going to try out with my third grader to kind of let him kick the tires on it. But from what she demonstrated and me experiencing it, I think it's worth checking out. So head over to vocabulary.quest and go on your vocabulary quest. And that's my EdTech recommendation. I recently, at the end of April 2024, read an article, or really an opinion piece, on the New York Times by Jessica Grose, and it was titled, "Every Tech Tool in the Classroom Should Be Ruthlessly Evaluated." In this piece, Jessica discusses the complexities and challenges of EdTech in schools, which she describes, or she says is often described, as a wicked problem due to its interconnected and ever-evolving nature. She's not wrong there. She argues for a comprehensive reevaluation of how technology is used in classrooms, driven by educator needs rather than the tech companies' offerings. Some of the highlights from this article, and I have linked to it in the show notes out at chrisnesi.com/245. So I do encourage you to read the article for yourself. But here are my takeaways. Educator-driven tech use needs to be more the focus. Tech in schools should be selected based on data and teacher experience, not dictated by the tech companies. If you're a decision maker at your school, schools need to identify the technology that is truly beneficial before acquiring it. Don't just run out to the hot thing. Don't just get software because the salesman does a good pitch. You need to ask your people. We also need to think about the commercial origins of EdTech. Many tech tools were originally created for commercial purposes, not with students in mind. This often results in products that don't effectively support educational outcomes. Also within the article, Jessica talks about the necessity and good standard. Schools should critically evaluate whether a tech tool is necessary and beneficial from ethical and pedagogical perspectives before implementing it. She also talks about privacy concerns and data protection. Let's be honest, this is a widespread concern among parents about the privacy of their students' data. Some solutions include destroying the data after its intended use and establishing an independent entity to oversee the quality of digital educational products. I think that's a fantastic idea. She also talks about classroom-level tech audits. Teachers like you and me, or teachers you know, should regularly audit the tech tools that we use, assessing their functions and whether or not they are still necessary. We need practical, low-tech solutions that can sometimes address issues created by tech tools. And the last point that she makes in the article, and again, go out to the website, chrisnesi.com/245, or I link to the article in the show notes where you're listening right now to swipe or tap away. She also talks about emphasizing an authentic connection. Beyond academics, schools play a crucial role in the socialization and community building of our students. Human relationships, and I've talked about the human element before on this very podcast, and authentic connections are vital for students being well-rounded and for their overall development. She concludes that while it's unrealistic and undesirable to eliminate all educational technology, a more thoughtful, educator-driven approach is needed to ensure that tech serves its intended purpose without compromising student privacy and their well-being. So definitely read the article. But now I just kind of want to go through. So she talks about evaluating tech in the classroom. Here's a possible solution. Districts and schools should first determine what tech is genuinely useful for their students. Not, oh, what are they doing in the next town over? Or, oh, we're in this state. What's going on across the country? You got to talk to your people. You should be based on data and your teachers' experiences with your community of students. Number 2, she talks about obviously technology being developed more for commercial purposes. As a school, schools should thoroughly vet and test new technology to ensure it meets the educational needs and the educational functions before you write the big check or sign that contract. When we think about, is the tech necessary and good? Is it meeting our ethical and pedagogical needs? There should be a review process where teams of teachers and schools and districts assess whether a tool is essential and whether it can be used in a way that is beneficial for teaching and learning. Some technology is going to be great and helpful for teachers. Some tools, yes, it will help teachers, but it's going to be more for the students. We just need to know how to use it. When we talk about privacy protections and better evaluation, we need to make sure that there are policies in place where the data that's collected by an EdTech tool must be destroyed after its intended purpose. And we need to create some overseeing government entity, something that can ensure the quality of digital educational products, not just companies that think they've got a great idea so they can get contracts with schools and districts or take teachers' money once a month. You want to have a vetting process at the district level. all the decision-making power should not be in the hands of your tech director, who may or may not actually care about education and students, right? There are certainly any number of examples of schools and districts that have people in charge of technology that don't know or care about anything going on in classrooms, or they just don't understand. So have some sort of technology committee. Hire a director of technology to oversee and evaluate educational technology who will work with other people, who will comply with the data privacy regulations that are out there. So consider that. And we need to, as classroom teachers, conduct audits, maybe at the end of each school year. As I'm recording this episode, we're getting near the end of the school year. It's time to consider what worked this year, what do we want to do next school year, and I think we need to look with a more critical lens. Conducting a tech audit using some type of framework, I don't have one developed, maybe I'll work on one, and we need to evaluate a tool's function. Is it just a novel tool? Is it truly a necessity? Could you teach without it? We need to encourage each other to almost defend each tool and its use. And, we've all been mandated to use some type of tech tool in the past because, the district's paying for it. We've got to use it. Well, that could stem from some of the other issues that I've talked about already. And we need to have authentic connections. So the importance of student connection and their well-being over solely academic outcomes, how do we get there? We need to foster those human relationships in the classroom. It is not just about tech. Maybe I should not just do a podcast called House of EdTech. It should be maybe House of Education and Technology and all this other stuff that we deal with. Although that's what Podcast PD is for. So if you want different perspectives other than the EdTech points, make sure you go and check out Podcast PD, because AJ and I are fostering human relationships with each other. We want to talk to you. So I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I just found this article to be very interesting, and it brought to mind some thoughts, and I wanted to bring those thoughts to you. This is not the end of the conversation. I would love to know how you evaluate your tech tools. Are you a ruthless evaluator of EdTech? Do you have tips for how to become a ruthless EdTech evaluator? I would love to know. So please send me an email, feedback@chrisnesi.com, or go to my website, chrisnesi.com, and connect with me. Send a voicemail. There's all different ways that we can reach out and be friends and continue this conversation. But my action step would be in the show notes, again, on the website or in the app you're listening in right now. Click on the link. Check out Jessica's article. It is from late April 2024. And let's continue the conversation. Let's put a bow on this episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of House of EdTech. If you haven't already, I invite you and I welcome you to subscribe or follow this podcast wherever you're listening, so that way you can continue to make it a part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. To get the most out of the podcast, make sure you check out the show notes. For this episode, it's chrisnesi.com/245, or they are a swipe or a tap away in your podcast player right now. I'd also like to let you know that I genuinely enjoy hearing from you, and I value the feedback and the perspectives of listeners like you. Whether you have thoughts or questions about a recent episode or any EdTech related topic, don't hesitate to reach out. My email is feedback@chrisnesi.com, and you can also go to chrisnesi.com/voicemail. Any input you provide just helps me create better content and improve the podcast. So please share your thoughts with me. Now, I know some of you benefit from this podcast. Well, if you're listening, I hope you benefit from it. So if you can think of somebody else who would benefit, please consider sharing the podcast with a friend. Spread it on social media, print it out, put a QR code in your school bathroom. I don't know. But whatever steps you take will help me reach a wider audience of educators, and they too will get value from the podcast. If you have shared the podcast in the past, thank you so much. If you share it in the future, thank you in advance. And lastly, I invite you to become an awesome supporter of the podcast. If you're getting value from the content, consider what that's worth to you and consider becoming an awesome supporter. I want to thank my current awesome supporters who include Leo from Brazil, Jeff Herb, Peggy George, Mike Messner, Matt Miller, Brian Carpenter, and Aaron Cummings. If you find value from the show and you want to become an awesome supporter, go to chrisnesi.com/awesome. Your generosity would go a long way in helping me to continue delivering exceptional content to you and the entire House of EdTech community. The next episode of the podcast is going to be episode 246, and my guest will be Tom Mullaney, and he's going to be sharing the downside and negatives of all this AI talk. So already, we see things differently. This is going to be a very interesting conversation, and I invite you to check it out on June 2nd, 2024. Until next time, thank you for learning with me, and remember, using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care.